This is Jupiter's Travels by Ted Simon, and it was published in 1979. But Ted Simon had been travelling around the world on his motorbike, Jupiter, in the early part. He started in the early part of the 70s and was sponsored by the Sunday Times and used to write dispatches which were published occasionally in the paper. I think I remember an instance where the editor had written something in the paper saying, "We haven't heard from Ted for a while and we're getting concerned about him." There were no mobile phones in those days. He was on his own. There were no cheap flights. There was no easy way of coming back home, and he was out of touch. The book is beautiful. He's quite a romantic, is Ted Simon, and he also is a kind of everyman in some ways. So he's not a great heroic figure, and he's easy to identify with his fears and concerns. But it's also easy to admire the way in which he overcame those and carried on. So there's also a kind of philosophical element to this book, whereby he is sort of thinking about who he is and his identity and the big questions, which we kind of mock quite easily. But who am I? Why am I here? What's the purpose, etc. But suddenly, when you're kind of days and days from anywhere and you've just got rough riding to get to any semblance of civilization, those questions begin to sound a bit more sensible and worthwhile. I've got an anecdote, and that is that 10 years ago I was staying in a bed and breakfast near Gatwick, and there was another guy came in, older than me, carrying a crash helmet, and he was clearly going to check in onto the flight the next morning with a crash helmet as well as his carry-on bag. I thought it was really strange. And I'd eaten dinner in the restaurant, and then that evening, as I was going out, I noticed him at a table on his own. So I just asked him, out of curiosity, why he was carrying a crash helmet onto an aeroplane. And he said, well, it was a special crash helmet that meant a lot to him. And he was going to South Africa, I think, to ride with some people on a motorbike. And he wanted to take his own special precious crash helmet with him, and he didn't trust it to the hold. It was that valuable to him. Anyway, we got talking, and at some stage he said that he was somebody who was very fortunate to have published a book in the 1970s, which he was still able to maintain a living from its royalties even 10 years ago. And I thought, this must be a really important big book. You can't get that many royalties from a minor book about motorcycle travel. Anyway, he was quite coy about saying who he was, and I thought, is this the guy who wrote Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, Robert Pirsig, a book I couldn't get on with? So I asked him if it was him, and he said, no, it wasn't me. And then I thought, blimey, I know it is. I said, are you Ted Simon? And he was. So he invited me to join him, and we got another bottle of wine, and we had a really enjoyable conversation talking that evening. So I was so excited to have met Ted Simon. The book is lovely. He repeated this journey when I think he was 70, and wrote another book about it, and talks about all the changes he's seen. But in those days, it was a real adventure. I mean, even going down through Italy felt like a long way away. And by the time he'd crossed the Mediterranean and was in North Africa, and there was no easy way home, and he was reliant on his bike not breaking down, or if it did, him being able to mend it. He meets all sorts of people. He's very kind and generous about the people he meets, although he gets into some scrapes. It does give you faith in people, and you know, he makes that observation that I've seen elsewhere, really, that it's the poorest people often in this world who can be the kindest. So as he got into countries where there wasn't great wealth and there wasn't the kind of Western standards of living, he found generosity and help and kindness. It's a really great read, and I would be interested to know what it feels like to read this book for the first time now. I know there's a TV programme with, I think, Ewan McGregor, where he and a colleague, a mate, rode around the world on motorbikes, and it's supposed to have the same kind of adventure. But as I watched it, I thought, they've got a backup crew, you know, they've got cameras, they've got mobile phones, they've got medical supplies, presumably, etc., etc. Simon was on his own, and people didn't know where he was for a while. It was an incredible adventure. He was gone 4 years, I think. So I really enjoyed this book, and I hope others will too. But I'm also really curious to know what it feels like if you come to it nowadays in a very, very different world. So there we go. Ted Simon, Jupiter's Travels. Thank you. So if you like this book, any comments you'd like to make will be very welcome, or any likes that you want to put on there will be very helpful. Thank you.